There is one type of whiskey that always stands above the others for me in fall, and that is Scotch. But not just any Scotch, peated Scotch. Something happens, I don't know, when the leaves fall, like it's all I want for some reason. I think the smell of it kind of reminds me of the smell of leaves, but before we get into all that, what is it? What brands can you try? What does it mean for a Scotch to be peated? We're going to touch briefly on those, and then we're going to compare some brands. But before we get to all of that, I want to take a second and mention the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, because I did just go to that. When this airs, it will have been at the beginning of this month, because this is still going to air in this month. So I went back in the beginning of September. It was super cool. I was excited to check it out. I want to talk about the experience that I had this year. First of all, every year that I've gone there, it's gotten bigger and bigger. So there's a bigger crowd. There's a more energy to it these days. And there were a ton of new distillers this year also. There were distillers. Let me bring these notes over this way, at least for this part. There were a ton of new distillers that I was really excited to talk to. I learned more about them. That part of it was very exciting. There's a couple that I'm actually going to try to have on the podcast that I met there. I felt like they had really cool stories. So I thought, let's try to get them onto the podcast. So cool new distillers, bigger every year, tons of energy. Like I said, should be some interviews coming up in the future. Met some really cool people there. Got to meet some of you guys. So maybe if you're listening to this, maybe I ran into you there, which was awesome. I really appreciate everybody who stopped to say hi or get a picture or whatever. That's always great. That's like that's like the best part of KBF. And if you ask any influencer or content creator, they're going to tell you that it's seeing people and getting to know people, especially people you've talked with online before. So that's a ton of fun. And I really appreciate everybody who said hi to me. It was great to meet you guys. And as I always say, if you see me at KBF or you see me in person anywhere, don't be afraid to say hi. I love saying hi to people and getting to know people, because that's like the whole point of whiskey, right? The one thing I do want to say about KBF, and this would be like a constructive criticism, I guess. I don't really know. I don't have a solution, but this is something that I want you guys to be aware of, especially if you're thinking about going next year. Okay, first of all, before I get to the criticism, I should mention that this year the tickets sold out very quickly. So next year, whenever the tickets go on sale, which I think is in the late spring, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong about that. It's either late spring or summer, I think. I don't know for sure. But whenever the tickets do go on sale, get on their email list or whatever you have to do to be notified, because they sell out relatively quickly if you do want to go. Now, if you're planning to go, the one constructive criticism that I do want to give, or the one thing I want you to plan for, is the lines are very long, and they're getting longer every year. I feel that potentially they need to come up with a different system for the way the lines go, because I think the problem is that there's one line for most distillers, and that line is people who just want to go up and try some stuff, and it's also people who want to talk to the distiller. And so if you're just in line because you want to go give something a try, you might get stuck because there might be somebody up there talking to the distiller for a couple of minutes, and then the next person talks to them for a couple of minutes or whatever. And so the lines can end up kind of like long wait times, even though they're not the longest lines in the world. So that's something I would say to plan for. My constructive criticism to KBF would be maybe have a line for people who just want to sample, and then have a line for people who want to talk to a distiller or a representative. And those people will know, like, hey, I'm waiting in line longer because it's to talk to this person. I don't know. I don't know the solution, but that's just something I wanted you guys to be aware of, to plan for, because it did take a little bit. It's getting a little bit longer to wait in line for the different whiskeys, making it a little bit more challenging to try the different whiskeys that you want. But other than that, it's always a blast, and I still love the festival, and I still want to go every single year. Hopefully, I continue to be able to do that in terms of just time and finances and things. But it's so much fun, and I really enjoy it, and I'm grateful to KBF for having me down as a media person to cover it and get some content down there, which was a ton of fun as well. So just wanted to say those couple things about it. I know that some people know that I was there and are wondering what my thoughts were, what's different this year, and that's basically where I'm at with KBF for right now. Now, let's talk about whiskeys for fall. There are actually a ton of whiskeys that are really good in the fall, and which one you're going to prefer is going to depend on your palate. It's going to depend on your preferences, what you like to drink, the type of things that you lean towards, and it's also going to depend on what mood fall has for you. So I'm going to give a couple of examples with different flavor profiles and different reasonings behind them, and then we're going to get into peated Scotch, which is my personal favorite in the fall. So there's a few different ones. The first one that I'm going to mention is rye whiskey. whiskey, because I think rye whiskey is a good one for if fall to you is like spice. Pumpkin spice is really popular right now, and ryes are spicy. Ryes are a little bit more herbal a lot of the time, so it's like herbs and spice and fresh cut hay and black pepper and those sorts of things. So if fall to you, like if what gets you in the fall mood is like spicy flavored things, not spicy as in burns like hot sauce, but spicy as in like baking spices and herbs and black pepper. If that's for you, then I think rye whiskeys are a really great option. Now, if you want to make them a little bit sweeter and get some like oak and some spice, high rye bourbons are a really great option in the fall. So that is going to kind of give you the best of both worlds, where I feel like bourbon, I drink bourbon all year round, if I'm being transparent, but I feel like if you're looking for a fall-themed drink, just plain bourbon or bourbon with a normal amount of rye or wheated bourbon, I think those are a little bit sweet. They almost lean towards the winter time for me. Like I said, I drink them all year round, but if I have to pick a season for it, it's almost a little bit more wintry for me. High rye bourbon, that rye gives it just enough of a kick and a spice and lightens it up a little bit with that herbal flavor that for me it works a little bit better in fall. Another one that's a newer one for me is some American single malts are nice in the fall. You get this, how do I want to put this? You get this malty sweet flavor along with, a lot of times, especially if it's finished in some kind of a wine cask or something like that, along with this fruitiness to it. Excuse me, and sometimes a little bit of like a baking spice. And so when you combine all those, it's kind of like, I've mentioned this before, it's kind of like jam on toast with like a little bit of a cinnamon. Like, I know how specific that is, but like the vibe, that jam on toast with some cinnamon or like some kind of a baking spice flavor to it, that vibe, it's not going to taste like that, but that vibe is the same vibe that some American single malts give me, especially the ones that are like really malty and or have a fruit finish to them. So I'm thinking off the top of my head, like Westward Whiskey's Pinot Noir cask is one that gives me that flavor. There's another one. Hold on, it's going to come to me. Well, this one doesn't have a fruitiness to it, but Minden Mills American Single Malt has kind of a dusty funk to it that does, it feels like fall to me. And then I think what I'm trying to think of is Courage and Convictions Cuvée Cask. There's another one that's got like the fruit, it's got the spice, it's got the malt, kind of like a combo like that. So experiment with some American single malts. Some of them are really good for fall. I think it's worth giving it a try. But let's get into peated scotch, because that's what we're here to talk about. I wanted to throw a few recommendations out there, because I know some of you might just be loyal listeners, which I really appreciate, and you don't actually care about peated scotch. So there's a few recommendations for you to try. Try them on a nice fall day, and just be like, see if it's helping you get into the fall time mood, or if you're like, no, this doesn't taste right. My favorite part of whiskey, and the reason that I'm doing this episode, the reason I recommend things like this all the time for seasons, things like that, my favorite part is that whiskey gives you that feeling of sentimentality. It's like when I taste a peated scotch now, I'm in fall. It helps me get in the fall mood. Just like listening to Christmas music, right? Drinking a Christmassy whiskey, a whiskey that you usually have around Christmas time, it can operate the same as Christmas music, where it helps you get into the mood a little bit for it. So I love that part of whiskey, where if I have it with these friends on this day, the next time I have it, I'm going to think about that. Same thing goes for seasons, holidays, things like that. So that's kind of why I'm doing this. But let's talk about what it means to be a peated scotch. This is going to be a very quick review, because I do talk about it in plenty of other episodes. But basically speaking, peat is this substance that is very common in Ireland and Scotland. It's like this mossy stuff that gets packed together in the bogs in Ireland and in Scotland. And you can chop it up into these bricks and basically make it into like charcoal. Well, when you go to make any whiskey with malted barley, you have to first malt the barley. The process of malting just means that you trick the barley into sprouting by wetting it down and giving it the right conditions to sprout. And then once it sprouts, you stop that sprouting. You dry it out. So in order to understand what peating is, you have to first understand what the malting process is and why you would need peat for it. So that's the malting process. And mind you that I mentioned, you're going to have to dry it out quickly to get that malting to stop, to get the barley to stop sprouting. In order to do that, you want to heat it up. Well, in Scotland, they have peat, like a lot of peat everywhere. And so it's very common that they would use the peat. They would burn it underneath the barley in order to stop that malting process. And then that peat smoke has a very distinct earthy herbal smell. It reminds me of the smell of like leaves in the fall. Sometimes it's a little bit more earthy and funky and almost a little like decaying, but I promise you, at least for me, the whiskeys don't taste that way, but the peat smell can be that way. So that's kind of what you can expect. That's where those flavors, these characteristics that we're about to talk about, that's where they're coming from. And so that is the peating process. So when I say I want a peated scotch in the fall, I'm specifically talking about scotches that have some of that peaty smoke in them. The borderline is kind of weird because there's some blended scotches where they don't consider themselves peated, but when you taste them, I'm pretty sure there's like a little bit of something peated blended into here. It's hard to say. There's also the fact that sometimes scotch kind of a funky flavor to it, and that funky flavor can get kind of mixed in with the peat flavor, and it's not actually peated. So it's a little confusing, but in general, peated scotches are going to identify themselves if they have that peat smoke to them. Sometimes maybe it's a blurry line, but these three here that I'm about to talk about, these are most definitely peated. Johnnie Walker Double Black, that's going to be in our blind tasting, is a blend, but it includes peated scotch in that blend to give it that smoky peat. And sometimes, like I mentioned, so in some of those blended ones, they're not going to taste like these two here, or even this one. So the Johnnie Walker Black, I'm pointing and I should be talking for those of you on the audio version. Lagavulin, Ardbeg, and Johnnie Walker Double Black. The Lagavulin and the Ardbeg are single malts, so the peat is there. It's not been blended out by anything. But Johnnie Walker Double Black is a blended whiskey, so it could have unpeated scotch in it. I don't know for sure, but you can give it a more subtle peat flavor. Johnnie Walker Double Black specifically does not have a very subtle peat flavor, in my opinion. You can really taste the peat smoke. But some blended whiskeys will have a more subtle peat flavor to them, so don't let that scare you away. Especially if somebody says like light peat in a review or something like that, just be aware that it might not be as extreme as some of the other peated scotches that you may have tried. Lafroig is, of course, the poster child for like extremely peaty, in my opinion. Lafroig for me is like the most earthy type of a smoke without like a brightness to it. It's more like dark, earthy flavor. So those are the three that we're about to be tasting. I'm going to run through a quick synopsis of them, and that's kind of what you can expect as well from blended scotches that may or may not have peat in them. If you're going to buy a blended scotch, some of them don't mention that there's peat in them, so I would first look it up if you hate peat, or if you're looking specifically for peat, I would first look it up and see if the reviews are saying that it has a peat smokiness to it, because that'll help. Sometimes it's like really hard to tell. I've had that on a couple of bottles. Okay, I'm going to get ready for this blind tasting, and then we're going to talk about what we're tasting. So our first contender and the most budget-friendly that we have is Johnnie Walker Double Black. Not to be confused with Johnnie Walker Black. So this is a blended whiskey. A lot of people claim, if you look up like what to expect, it's kind of like Johnnie Walker Black, but smokier and bolder. For me, you can tell they're similar, but I almost just consider them different whiskeys. I just consider this as like a peaty type of a Scotch flavor, but it is blended, so it is the most approachable in terms of price as well. I think it's between $40 and $50, but depending on where you're at. 80 proof, no age statement, and I personally remember it being smoky, but I don't think as smoky as the other two are going to be. But also, if I'm remembering correctly, it was the most sort of like earthy. I think the other two have a bright sweetness to them, almost like a lemon peel, whereas I think the Johnnie Walker Black is going to have the least of that and be kind of the most, I guess dark is like the word that I'm looking for in terms of flavor. Ardbeg 10-year is our next one, so this is roughly $60. This is a single malt scotch from the Islay region of Scotland. The Islay region, if you don't know, is typically known to have very strong peaty flavors to the whiskey. They're typically going to use peat in a lot of their whiskey. This is 92 proof, so it is the highest proof one that we're going to be drinking today, but they're all close. Our range goes from 80 to 92, so they're close enough that I think it'll be all right for blind tasting. I remember Ardbeg 10-year being the more bright but still punchy one. So this one I think is going to have the most peat kick to it. but it also is brightened up by some lemon and a little bit of like a sea salt. Maybe a little bit of that leafiness. Like I know like peat has the smoky flavor. I think this has a little bit of the leafiness that Laphroaig tends to have. And I think Johnnie Walker Double Black is going to have the most of that leafiness. I'm expecting Ardbeg to have a little bit of it as well. And then we've got Lagavulin 16 year. Did I mention? Yeah, I mentioned the price was $60 on that. Then if we move to Lagavulin 16 year, this is the most expensive. So this is about $100. It's also a single malt from the Islay region of Scotland. This one does obviously have a little bit more age. So obviously Ardbeg 10 year is 10 years old. And then Lagavulin 16 year is 16 years old. That age, in my opinion, and we're going to see in this blind tasting, is that my opinion is that age smoothed it out a little bit, and so you get the peatiness, but it comes with like a honey type sweetness. I think the malt starts to overtake the peat and balance out with it. Now, don't get me wrong, if you don't drink peated scotch, this is going to taste super smoky to you, but compared to the other two, I think this is going to have the most sort of friendly peat flavor to it. I think it's going to still have a little bit of that citrus and a little bit of that brightness that the Ardbeg has, but I think it's going to be the most friendly, approachable type of peat flavor that any of the other two have. If I didn't mention it already, this is 86 proof, and yeah, that's basically what I remember about the tasting notes. I did that one a little bit out of order, but that's what I remember from it, so that's what I'm expecting. While I'm getting ready for this tasting, I do want to take a moment to say if you're enjoying this show, you like this free content that is just provided to you on YouTube, please consider liking, subscribing, ringing the notification bell if you're on YouTube or on whatever podcast platform you're on, subscribing, leaving a rating or a review if you're able to on that platform. And then if you want even more whiskey noobs in your life, there is extra content on the Patreon. There's bonus podcast episodes as of right now. We're working on barrel picks. We're working on monthly meetups with the patrons. Lots of fun stuff going on over on the Patreon. And of course, it is the best way to support this show. So please just consider going and checking that out. There will be a link down in the show notes. Let me get this tasting set up. One last thing, I'm going to kind of stake my claim before I do the tasting. Here's what I'm expecting. So first of all, we should be able to figure out price order because there's a pretty big difference in price. So hopefully the Lagavulin tastes the best, and then the Ardbeg tastes right behind that, and the Johnnie Walker Double Black is right behind that. I am expecting the Ardbeg is going to be given away by, I know how cliche this is, but by its smoothness. I think it's going to be the least offensive, the least sort of like spiky. I know that's a weird word, but these other two will leave like a spiky tinge of alcohol on my palate, I'm expecting. So I think this is going to definitely be the most sort of honey approachable one. I think Ardbeg is going to be characterized by its strength. It's going to have a punch to it in a good way. It's going to have that sea spray and that lemon peel that I hope make it stand out. And I think Johnnie Walker Double Black is going to be characterized by having a little bit more of an alcohol burn and a little bit less flavor. That is what I'm expecting. I know it's the lowest proof, but I mean alcohol taste. Like I'm going to be able to taste the alcohol in it, I think. I hope I'm wrong because I think blind tastings are the best way to learn, hey, are these actually worth the prices? Is one of these worth more than the other two? So hopefully I'm wrong, but I think that's what I'm expecting. I have them all loaded up in my solo blind. I don't know if it is on your screen or not, but we're going to spin it now, and I'm doing this part on camera as proof that I don't know which is which. And as I'm spinning it, I'm going to remove the cover. Don't do it while it's still spinning fast if you have your own solo blind because they will fly off. I've done that before, but luckily there wasn't any whiskey on it when I did that. And now I'm taking them off without even looking at it. So I've already spun it and taken them off on camera. Now you know this is definitely real, hopefully. A lot of people say they think peated scotch smells like a bonfire, and let me tell you, this whole table smells like a bonfire right now. Let me talk about what else you can expect from peated scotch before this tasting. If you've never had peated scotch, a lot of people say bonfire, like I just said, earthy, leafy. A lot of people will say rubber bands or band-aids, which are surprisingly accurate. I know how weird that sounds, but believe me, it's weird in a good way, I guess. For me, it depends on if it's your palate or not. So those are a few of the kind of weirder things you can expect, and you can see how these land in a totally different flavor profile than other whiskeys, especially other scotches. It's a distinct difference. I also want to mention that because if you don't like peated stuff, or if you try it after this episode and don't like it, Keep in mind that there are other scotches that don't have any peat to them at all, and they're very sweet and they're very approachable. So a lot of people confuse scotch for always having that smoky taste. It does not have to always have that smoky taste. That's enough talking for right now. I'm going to do my first round of tasting, get some first impressions, and I'll see you in less than a Mississippi. I failed to mention that I haven't drank any of these in a long time except for the Lagavulin. I just had the Lagavulin, I think that was yesterday. Yeah. But the other two I haven't drank in a super long time. So this is probably going to be really hard. Here's what I got on the nose. Number one, oh wait, I need to go in reverse order, right? Because my right is your left. So number one on my right-hand side, your left-hand side, if you're watching the video. Number one has the most tanginess to it. I think it's probably the Ardbeg, just guessing on the nose. I like to guess on the nose because I like to embarrass myself. The number one has the most tangy nose to it. Reminds me of the lemon peel that I would expect from Ardbeg. So far, my guess would be that number one is Ardbeg. Number two has a similar tanginess to it, actually, but it's a little bit less... I don't want to say offensive because that's not the right word. It's a little less tingly on the nose. Like it makes my nose tingle a little bit less. So I'm thinking that's the Lagavulin because I remember Lagavulin having some lemony flavor to it. So I think that's probably what that is, which leaves Johnnie Walker Double Black on the end here. Number three on my left, your right, has the least amount of a lemon tanginess to it, but it does have kind of a sweetness to it, which made me think maybe Lagavulin, because I don't remember what Double Black tastes like, so I could have those two mixed up potentially, or I could have all three of these mixed up. So that's where I'm at so far. It does have some of that sweet maltiness come through, but it doesn't have as much happening on the nose, which makes me think it's the Johnnie Walker Double Black. All right, we're going to dive into the first tasting. I am using a spittoon. We need to normalize spittoons in the whiskey world, I think, for sobriety reasons. I'm going to taste them, and I'll get back to you in, once again, less than a Mississippi. Boy, am I in a bit of a pickle here. So let's talk about it. So I think what's happening is probably that I was wrong about the initial character of the whiskeys. Because if I go based on tasting notes, I would get one answer. And if I go based on quality, or how much flavor I'm getting from it compared to how much burn I'm getting from it, I think I would go a different way. So I might do two guesses. I might do one guess based on notes and then one guess based on quality, like based on which one tastes the most expensive. Here's where I'm at. Okay, so basing things on notes, these two on my right, so number one and number two, they taste the most similar in terms of notes, in terms of characteristics. They both have a zing to them. They both have a punch to them, which would make me think Ardbeg and Lagavulin. But so far in this tasting, number one tastes the worst, I think. It's really hard because 1 and 3 are very different, so I've gone back and forth between them a bunch. But I think number one is giving me the most alcohol and the least flavor, which could still make an argument for Lagavulin because Lagavulin is kind of mellow, which I like about it on its own, but it could be that the strength of the other two is like powering over it. Maybe I'm talking myself into that. We'll see. But in terms of flavor when you're drinking all three at the same time, number one kind of just gets steamrolled by the other two. And I've been trying to rinse my mouth out with water, but it's still noticeable. Number two definitely has the most punch, which would make me think Ardbeg, but it also has the most body, which would make me think Lagavulin. But like I said, maybe that Lagavulin's just mellow. And then number three, this is the real curveball. If this is Johnnie Walker Double Black, then its quality is significantly better than I thought it was. If it's not Johnnie Walker Double Black, then its characteristics are significantly different than I thought it was. So maybe number one is actually like the Lagavulin, and it's very mellow and approachable, but still has a nice body to it, still has a nice pop of flavor to it. And that's what I'm getting from number three. But that would mean that I have Lagavulin and Johnnie Walker Double Black flopped in my head for which one has the most lemony flavor, which one has the most pop, just the overall characteristics of it. So that's where I'm at. If it sounds confusing, it's because it is, and that helped me work out my thoughts a little bit, but I'm still pretty stumped. I think what I'm going to do next, I'm going to taste number 1 by itself for a second and see how much I like it, because maybe this can happen in a blind tasting where you can accidentally get a pairing. And what I mean by that is if you drink Lagavulin 16 on its own, maybe it's delicious, but if you drink it after having drank Ardbeg, maybe it loses all of its flavor. So in doing all this talking, I'll let my palate rejuvenate a little bit. I'm going to have a little bit more water, and then I'm going to drink number 1 again and try to really focus on if I think it's a really expensive, nice scotch or not. I think I'm leaning toward number 2 being Ardbeg, and then numbers 1 and 3 being Lagavulin and Johnnie Walker Double Black, but I might have them flopped, because I might just have the characteristics of them off. But then that leaves like, well, maybe number 2 could be Lagavulin because it seems to have the most body. Hard to say. Okay, let's give you another Mississippi while I figure out how to iron all that out in my head. Okay, we are entirely out of sample number 1, or number 3 for you guys, so I guess I just got to move on. I gotta make a decision here. Here's where I'm at. I think number 3 tastes better than number 1. I think it's higher quality. That said, the one place I'm almost certainly going to get something wrong, but if something's going to go wrong, I think it's that number 3 might have a bitterness to it from the peat, like a burnt flavor to it that would turn people away. And maybe that makes it the Johnnie Walker Double Black. Maybe that's the sort of impurity there. It could be the case. But number 1, it's really good by itself. Don't get me wrong. It's nice. But it just doesn't bring the body. It's a little bit alcohol-y for the amount of flavor that I'm getting. So I think I'm going to do this in terms of characteristics, and I'm going to do it in terms of quality. So in terms of characteristics, I would say number 1 is Lagavulin 16. And remember, characteristics is not a measure of quality. This is just off the top of my head, what I thought I remembered them tasting like. So I'm going to say number 1 would be Lagavulin 16, number 2 would be Ardbeg, and number 3 would be Johnnie Walker Double Black. But here's my actual guess in terms of quality, and I hope I'm right. I think, well, actually, not 100% in terms of quality, because I'm almost certain number 2 is Ardbeg, but it's my favorite. It is the best. So, okay, I guess I should put that. If I'm going to go just based off price range, just based off what I like the most, then I would say number 2 is the most expensive. Number 3 is right behind it, and number 1 is the least expensive. I got to lean forward into my mic here. I'm putting them in that order so I don't forget in front of me. Okay. That would be how much I like them. That's based on quality. I think number 2 is the best, number 3 is the next best, and number 1 is the least. I really hope I'm wrong about the characteristics of these things. So let's talk about what I'm getting, because then I'm going to look up the distiller's notes after I reveal them. So I'm going to blindly tell you what I think about them. And then after I reveal them, I'm going to look up the distiller's notes and let you know what the distiller says about it. So number 2, my favorite. Let's start there. Definitely some peat, but the peat comes through with like a black pepper and a lemon that makes me think it's Ardbeg, but it's still my favorite. Excuse me. And it's distinct. It's punchy enough to pull away from just like the smoke. Sometimes the smoke kind of weighs down my palate. So you got black pepper, you've got lemon, you've got some peat, you've got a little bit of a maltiness, and then on the finish, you've got saltiness. I noticed that right away. No, number 3, which is my next favorite, number 3 has the least amount of the salt, the least amount of the lemon. It is sweet, and it is more earthy. It leans more towards a Lafroig, where it's leafy, it's earthy, it reminds me of a bonfire, it reminds me of the smell of leaves on the ground in the fall, and then it's got like a honey, it's got a little bit of a maltiness to it. That's kind of what number 3 is characterized as for me. And then number 1 for me has the most alcohol flavor to it. It has a little bit, it definitely still has the peat smoke. It's more like number 2 in that it has the lemon, it has the salt, it has a little bit of the black pepper, but it's just a lot more mellow. Also on the nose, as it sat, it got maltier and maltier. I started to smell more malt and smell a little bit of a white sugar in it. But the alcohol was just too noticeable, which makes me hope it's the Johnnie Walker Double Black, because maybe there's some grain whiskey mixed into there. I hope it's not Lagavulin, because I've always loved Lagavulin, and I'm going to be heartbroken if that's what it is. But I gotta give myself the get out of jail free card, even though that's not fair. But my one excuse for the Lagavulin, if that is what number 1 is, would be that it's not pairing well with these other two, and so the other two are making the Lagavulin taste worse. That could absolutely be the case. I mean, that's absolutely feasible. But even then, it kind of makes me sad because I would want Lagavulin to be so good that it would stand out against the other two. I rest my case. It's time to reveal these bad boys and see whether I'm right or wrong. So, we're going to go in reverse order, of course. My least favorite in terms of quality. Please don't be Lagavulin. Johnnie Walker. Okay, we're out of the woods. If Lagavulin gets beat by Ardbeg, I'm okay with that. That's fine. Number 2, in second place, this is the one that if I had to guess now, I would say is the Lagavulin, and I think I like the Ardbeg better if that's the case. Whoops, upside down. Lagavulin 16 year came in second, which means I liked Ardbeg 10 year the most. Now listen. Here's what I'm going to say, because I mentioned that 1 and 2 had the most similar flavor to them, and then 3 had the most different flavor. The Ardbeg and the Lagavulin are absolutely 2 different flavors. I think if you want something smoother and sweeter, you're going to like number 2 more. I loved how much, or you're going to like, I'm sorry, let's just start using the names here. If you want something smoother and sweeter, you're going to like the Lagavulin more. If you want something with some body, I liked the Ardbeg the most because it just had the most body, it had the most flavor, it had the most reason to overlook some of the peat earthiness and bitterness, and the most reason to overlook the alcohol strength. It just had the most character to me. That said, one of the reasons I thought number 1 was Lagavulin is I thought it had more alcohol in it than number 3. So the Lagavulin is stronger than the Johnnie Walker Double Black, but the Lagavulin tasted weaker than the Johnnie Walker Double Black. So once again, going back to that smoothness, very impressive if that is what you're looking for. I think because I'm a bourbon drinker, I like some saltiness, I like some pepper, I like some pop. The Ardbeg for me was my favorite. And that's my internal bias, which is of course present in any tasting. But that is, I think, what is going on there. Now let's talk about what the distillers say you should get from them, because I gave, I think, some pretty different notes than what the distillers would say. Okay, so Johnnie Walker Double Black, I said lemon, I said black pepper, I said a little bit of a saltiness. Here's what they say for palate. They say peat smoke swirls through rich dried fruits, orange zest brings freshness, and creamy vanilla adds sweetness. I disagree with a lot of that. I get way more. The orange zest and the peat is about all I agree with. Maybe a little bit of a vanilla. But I get way more pop, way more black pepper, a little bit of the creamy vanilla. Dried fruits I don't get much of at all. For me, this is more in the realm of pop, more in the realm of pepper, some lemon, like I mentioned, and then that peat, of course. So I think I disagree with Johnnie Walker Double Black. Lagavulin 16 year on the palate, they have dry peat smoke fills the palate with a gentle but strong sweetness, followed by sea salt with touches of wood. Now that I actually agree with. So the sea salt is not nearly as strong because of the saltiness of the other two, but I love the touches of wood because that is a great way to describe what I mean when I say it's like darker and sweeter and not necessarily doesn't have as much punch or pop to it. So I really like that. So definitely like a peat smoke with a woodiness, maybe a pinch of a salt, but not as much as the other two. And then Ardbeg, I gotta put in my date of birth. Okay. I'm not telling you guys my date of birth. You might know it. I don't know. Have I mentioned that before? I probably have while typing it in on here. Okay, now we're at Ardbeg. I remember some of these tasting notes because I remember it was so weird. Okay, taste. An explosion of crackling peat sets off millions of flavor explosions. They say explosion twice. Peat effervesces with tangy lemon and lime juice. Black pepper pops with sizzling cinnamon spice toffee. Then comes a wave of brine infused with smooth buttermilk, ripe bananas, and currants. So there's even more. I'm not going to go into all of it. There's they just threw every flavor note out there. But I will say the beginning flavor notes are pretty good. Lemon and lime juice, black black pepper definitely, like, explosion's a great way to put it. It's got a pop to it. It has a little bit of a punch to it. The peat is very strong. I don't get as many of the sweet notes they end up mentioning because they mention bananas, currants, toasted marshmallows, creamy cappuccino, espresso. I don't get as much of that sweet stuff, but more of that salty, lemony pop that I mentioned. So not too bad, kind of close on the Ardbeg. I like Lagavulin's description because I find that significantly more accurate than what I was saying when they added in those wood flavors. And thank goodness I didn't mix up Lagavulin and Johnnie Walker Double Black. I am just so happy about that, in terms of quality, at least. Definitely off my memory, I was completely opposite about their characteristics. But in terms of quality, thank goodness I didn't mix those two up. That would have been a sad day for Lagavulin. But hey, we discover stuff like that. And let's not forget, I still picked the $60 over the $100. So I will be drinking the $60 a lot more, actually. I'm really glad that I did this blind tasting. If you would have asked me before, I would have said I like Lagavulin 16 the most. But I think for me and my palate, I think Ardbeg 10-year is just better. One last time I want to mention, though, these depend on your preferences, and I don't want to give any shade to Johnnie Walker Double Black because by itself I do actually really enjoy it, but I personally would probably pay the extra $20 for the Ardbeg. And then the Lagavulin is just for a different mood or a different palate. It is definitely smoother, it's definitely more approachable, it's definitely mellower, and has those nice woody undertones. Delicious, but I think for me personally, I think I'm going to go with Ardbeg more instead. It's got more body, it's got more flavor, and of course it's got that pop to it that I really enjoy. So hopefully you guys learned as much as I did in this episode. That was a wild blind tasting. That was a heck of a roller coaster. I went completely different from what I said on the noses. So very, very interesting one for me. Hopefully it was for you too. I'm going to leave you guys with learn to drink, drink to learn. Hi there. If you're still listening to this, then I'm going to assume that you enjoyed the show. So please consider taking a moment to leave a 5-star rating or review and subscribe on whatever platform it is that you're watching/listening to this on. And as always, please, please, please drink responsibly. Cheers.